€464,000. That's the award that the Workplace Relations Commission awarded to a gentleman, Mick Kiley, for unfair dismissal. This award is the highest ever award for unfair dismissal in Ireland, and it exceeds the previous record of $329,000. The background to the case is that Mick Kiley was a founder of a tech firm. The tech firm admitted unfairly dismissing him, and they have been ordered to pay €464,000. That's made up of €440,000 for a loss of earnings. He was out of work for 17 months or thereabouts, and part of the reason for that, according to the WRC adjudicator, was that he had a non-compete clause in his contract and therefore couldn't mitigate his loss. So €440,000 for loss of earnings and €24,000 for notice pay. He was one of the founders of this business. He was a musician, a composer and an entrepreneur. His name is Mick Kiley. He was ousted as the chief executive in 2021. He had a salary of $340,000 a year, and he founded this firm in 2013. He was able to claim virtually all of his 17 months period of unemployment after the WRC decided that he could not be reasonably expected to mitigate his loss when he was subject to a non-compete clause in his contract of employment. The WRC found that Mr. Kiley had shown considerable effort and tenacity by re-establishing himself in business in just 17 months. This is the highest ever award. It surpasses, as I say, a previous award of $329,000 for a dismissed sales executive. The dismissal came about in November 2021. The company's chief of staff told him by email that he was no longer an employee and that he was prohibited from accessing or entering the premises of the company by any means. Please understand, he said, it would be considered trespassing if you do so, and we will not treat such an unlawful act mildly, etc., etc. So Mr. Kiley said he had been locked out of the company's premises by the following day, with all access to company systems and emails blocked since that point. The main matter in dispute was how much money was due to Mr. Kiley. The company had admitted in advance that his contract of employment was governed by Irish law and that the dismissal was unfair. So essentially all the WRC were doing in this case was quantifying the loss and arriving at a figure, and obviously they arrived at a fairly substantial figure. His case was that he left with significantly reduced earnings following his dismissal. He told the WRC that he had made about €10,000 in 2022 by operating a holiday business in County Clare, and a further €2,000 as an artist. He submitted, or his legal team submitted, that because his client was subject to a non-compete clause, that is a restrictive covenant restricting him from going into business in the respondent's company's area, his hands were tied in terms of mitigating his loss. He wanted to continue his innovative work, and he asked the company who had fired him to let him set up a new company, but this was refused. The company denied this. So it was submitted that he was down $478,000 as a result of the dismissal. The employer, their argument, legal team's argument, was that Mr. Kiley had failed to make efforts to mitigate his loss because of inertia on his part. The WRC noted submissions from counsel for the employer, Mary Paula Guinness, that there were areas of the music and technology fields where Mr. Kiley could have worked that were not restricted by the non-compete clause, and that the complainant could have looked outside his area of interest. In other words, he could have got a job in McDonald's or Burger King or wherever. The company's view was that the hospitality business established by Mr. Kiley was a substantial one and could have been run successfully. However, the complainant, Mr. Kiley, decided to stay in the US where he could not work, and in turn this is the reason why his earnings during this period are relatively modest, it was claimed. The adjudicator calculated Mr. Kiley's losses over the 17-month period between dismissal and the WRC hearing last September at €460,000, and he said he would reduce the figure by €20,000 on the basis of the average industrial wage for the 5-month period after the non-compete clause expired. In other words, after the restrictive covenant had expired, there was no excuse for not getting a new job and mitigating his loss, so he was reduced by 20 grand. He said, the adjudicator said, it was remarkable that Mr. Kiley at the age of 58 had been able to get back into business in just 17 months, and that demonstrates considerable effort and tenacity, and that that time was used well. He awarded a further award of 24,000 for 4 weeks notice pay, to which he was entitled for a breach of the minimum notice in terms of Employment Act 1973, bringing the total sum to €464,000. This is, as I say, a record award by the WRC for unfair dismissal. It equates to 17 months' salary in this case. Hope you find the video useful. I hope you find it instructive, and if you're an employer, you need to be careful. You need to be careful because the WRC can award up to 2 years' salary for unfair dismissal pursuant to the Unfair Dismissals Act 1977. The employee is under a duty of obligation to mitigate his loss, but in this case the opportunity for Mr. Kiley to mitigate his loss was significantly curtailed by the fact that there was a restrictive covenant in the contract of employment, and paradoxically this is where the contract of employment written in favour of the company, the employer, actually backfired, because once they fired him, then the contract came back to bite them, because Mr. Kiley had an excuse basically, or had a good reason, quite frankly, to not restrict or not to mitigate his loss, because he would have been in breach of the contract of employment if he did so. Anyway, give it a thumbs up down below if you like this video, and if you are listening on my podcast, the Irish Law and Small Business Podcast, available on Spotify, iTunes and everywhere else that you might listen to podcasts, I would appreciate if you left a review. Thank you very much.